Hello and welcome to GameBurst Replay, the monthly GameBurst roundtable where we take a look at classic games from a few years ago. This month's game is The Unfinished Swan. Player, better known as Zan, and joining me this month are royal artists Chris Easton.
Ahoy, hi.
And Andy Duncan.
Hello.
That's the best I could come up with, I'm afraid. It didn't sound too insulting anyway. Right, so The Unfinished Swan. As usual, we'll start with a description of the box art. Of course, it doesn't have one because it's a digital game, but Chris, would you like to describe what its page looks like?
That on here, I don't need to find it.
That's on there.
Okay, yeah, there. Basically the photo is a title with a swan incorporated into it, and then a frog to the right. It's surrounded with spatters, which is the tie into the beginning of the game.
Thank you. And Andy, do you want to have a go at describing what the Unfinished Swan is?
No. The reason being is I haven't got a clue what is going on with this. But the sort of premise of the game is you are a young child who is falling asleep. His mother left a bunch of unfinished paintings, and upon his awakening one day, notice that the swan had disappeared from the game, and you get sucked into the painting. Now, if you're anything like me, I stood around for the first 10 minutes, not realising what I was meant to do until I started flicking my paintbrush, and you start making the painting yourself and chasing down the swan.
Okay, yeah, sounds pretty good. I think we'll probably, as we get into discussing the game itself, we'll probably reveal a bit more about what the game is really, but that's good enough to start with. Right, as usual, we'll take a look at Metacritic. Okay, let's start with... this is obviously a PlayStation exclusive, so we'll start from a review from a PlayStation publication. So Push Square gave it a 100, or 10 out of 10. The Unfinished Swan is the second generation's defining downloadable from Sony in 8 months. Giant Sparrow's debut is a confident creative tour de force, and it's one of the most imaginative ventures you'll ever play. Let's take one that's a bit more middling. IGN gave it got a Metacritic score of 90. The Unfinished Swan is short, and the challenges you face in the 2-hour game aren't all that challenging, but they don't need to be. This is a storybook for you to open and get lost in. And let's see if we can find something that's a little bit more negative. Edge magazine can always be relied on. Gave it a 60. If Unfinished Swan didn't do such a marvellous job at tantalising players with its patently evolving visual signature, it would be easy to sense the messy whiteboard of ideas churning beneath the surface. It's not that the game feels unfinished, just ungainly. I see what they did there. And then let's take good old friends of the show, Game Critics. The Unfinished Swan isn't without its charms, but there are moments in the abandoned city with the vines overgrowing walls and produce in all directions that I almost loved it. However, in its very short runtime, The Unfinished Swan introduces too many different ideas and doesn't sufficiently explore or refine them, not even the bad ones. That might suit the theme, but it makes for a game that feels frustratingly incomplete. Right, we have some correspondence. In fact, we have a very lengthy correspondence from our very own James Batchelor, and he wrote, "Personally, this game was a gamble for me, but one that more than paid off. Prior to this, I'd purchased very few download-only console games, always sticking to free trials for things like Xbox Live games. When I finally got a PS3, this was one of my first, if not the first, purchases I made through the PlayStation Store. I'd seen the tech demo back when it was first unveiled and been intrigued by the full game. Watching people play it at Eurogamer that year, I wondered if there would be enough substance to justify purchasing the final product. My doubts were unfounded. The Unfinished Swan is a masterpiece. Its striking art direction and the way that it influences the gameplay is inspired and feels unlike anything I've played before or since. A lazier developer would have stuck with a single mechanic of a blank world and black ink, but the studio wonderfully expand on both the concept and the world with the introduction of shadows and the vines that grow wherever you spray water. The world takes shape the further you get in, and by the final chapter you won't want to leave. The vines are such a great example of why this game works for me more than just a virtual walkabout through a fantastical world. There are devious puzzles to solve before you can progress, recreating the atmosphere and triumph of working your way through a Zelda dungeon. Add to that the serene music and the wonderful storybook presentation of the narrative, and this becomes easily one of the best games I've played in the last generation. Although I should really go back and find those last balloons. Yeah, I'm stuck on that as well. Right, we've got some Twitter and Facebook correspondence as well. So, Andy, would you like to take the first of the Twitter responses?
Yep, so Colm has said, the Unfinished Swan, I just wasn't for me, although I was looking forward to playing it, but when I did, it wasn't for me. Dastardly Jabby has also put a beautiful, elegant story told with unique visuals and gameplay, a wonderful experience.
Yeah, Sean O'Brien says, wanted to like it more than I did. My thumb got tired/sore from hammering the X button so much. Cute ending, though. And Roger Skelston says, tried it for about 10 minutes and it made me motion sick. I just couldn't see the enjoyment in fumbling around, turning stuff black. Kept getting lost or unable to find things, so I just gave it up, too much effort. I blame myself because everyone else tells me the game is fantastic. And after a hard day's work, wanting a bit of mindless gaming escapism isn't just my cup of tea. Just isn't my cup. I can't.
Close enough. Right, okay. So let's throw it open to the panel now then. So let's start with yourself, Chris. Was this the first time you played it?
No, it's the second.
Okay, so tell us what you think of Unfinished Swan.
I really liked it. Yes, I got it on the PS3 when I got my PS3, and then played it this time on PS4. And it looks whiter. I don't know. But yeah, I know the game critics said, that they didn't like that it swapped around styles a bit too much. I like that, so I think it kept it fresh, and it sort of like did, because it would have been boring to just be the white room throwing ink everywhere. So I like that it did go from that to the vines, to the darkness, and then to the blueprint thing. And yeah, it is more of a storybook walkthrough rather than a there's not, the gameplay is chucking stuff about, but there are a few puzzles to work out. And yeah, I really liked it. The story's fantastic, and the art style, just the contrast in the first one, and then how the vines wiggle through everywhere is it. They've done a lot with a very small, I say effort, but a very sort of refined experience.
Yeah, it never felt like it outstayed its welcome with the puzzles. No. It reminds me of the kind of fluidic puzzles in Portal 2, which I feel did get quite repetitive after a while, and this kind of, the brevity of this was actually quite welcome. It's like, okay, I've done a few of these now, that's cool. Oh, look, something new.
Yeah. I didn't bother with the balloons, really. I sort of like found ones that were easy to find and then just didn't bother. Because I think first time I played, I spent a bit more time on that. I just got annoyed because they're not, some of them are, there was one chapter in the dark bit that I got none because they're too dark to find.
Yeah, they're basically invisible. They are also on the very first level. Some of them are actually white, so I can't see them.
Yeah, and I mentioned it now, the credit sequence was fantastic as well. Just doing it as a sort of a look back at, sort of flashback sequence almost, and then popping the credits on the walls, and the fact they mentioned it was funny as well. And apparently there are balloons in that as well, which I found one.
Yeah, there's balloons hidden everywhere, I'm afraid. Andy, was this your first time, or have you played before?
No, this was my first time.
Okay.
And for the first 5-10 minutes, I didn't have a clue what was going on. I just sat there looking at white, thinking, okay, something's going to come along and do something, until I inadvertently pressed a trigger and flicked a bit of ink. And then I flicked too much ink and didn't know where I was going. It took me a while to get my hands on and the concept of what I was meant to be doing and where I needed to go. I thought it sounded fantastic. Then some of the little puzzles, as you've already mentioned, were quite good. It's just the type of game for me. I got about halfway through and something wasn't clicking. So I can kind of see why Colm and Roger were making the comments that they did. It was just not so much open to interpretation, but just the gameplay elements and the mechanics just didn't sit right with me. Going through a page of white, it took me too long, I think, to move around and understand what I was doing, only to have little glimpse of gold in the backgrounds and think, right, how am I going to get over there? But then aesthetically, when you're going through some of the water sequence, up the stairs, through and chasing the swans, it sounded fantastic. The atmospherics were really good. Just the gameplay for me just didn't sit quite right. I got about halfway through the third chapter and chucked it, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. So the third chapter, where was that? Was that the city where you got the maze?
Yeah. So you've gone through the castle, you've gone through the maze, you get to the city, and then I just couldn't stick no more of it. I don't know what was there, why, no. I tried it 2 or 3 more times after that, and it just didn't sit right with me.
Okay, interesting. Right, well, this is where I hold my hand up and say, I think this is the 3rd time I've completed it, and it is actually one of my favourite games of all time, so I will only really have very, very, very good things to say about it. I think the key thing for me was when I first played this, I actually also wrote a review for, I can't remember which site it was now, but when I first played this, we actually played it as a family when my daughter was only about 3, and the 3 of us, we literally went through it like a storybook. It was quite incredible how effective the storytelling is, even to a young child. And I think for me that is the key, the secret with it. I mean, the clever use of basically physics puzzles that go all the way through. I mean, it starts off as you found out, Andy. It starts off with black paint, and then you get water. And then after that, you actually get different styles. By the end, you're actually creating boxes, and you're in like this geometric world where you're actually creating shapes and trying to stack them up to climb up on things. So it does, and obviously in the dark world, it's pitch black, and there's lots of sort of water and movement and physics puzzles there. But it does, its sort of narrative structure is so strong for such a very short game, and the kind of the way the story is told like a fable from beginning to end is just wonderful, and it's a very sort of melancholic story as well. It's obviously about a child's loss, loss of his parent, and trying to fill in the gaps in his life that he will now have in the future, and obviously using the unfinished paintings as a metaphor for that. It's very thought-provoking and evocative, I found. But I guess I can see where some people have struggled with it, because it doesn't, particularly in those opening chapters, it doesn't really hold your hand. It's an exploration game. You're expected to go out there and sort of work it out, and I can see how for some folk that might be a challenge. Whereas for me, that's the sort of game I really like. I like things that sort of, I don't know, test me or intrigue me, make me want to explore, as opposed to just shooting stuff in the head.
I agree with the narrative and the art style. I thought it was fantastic. The way those storyboards came on the wall when you flicked the paint at them, that was really good. But I think I can see why you would say about the hand-holding part, but there was nothing.
No, there isn't,
to the point of, I distinctly remember pausing the game, looking for controls to find out, right, what does do what am I meant to do? There was nothing there, and then I started flicking and moving, and then it slowly started coming through. But I just think that first initial bit, if there was just like a single line at the top that said, press R2 to flick your paintbrush or something like that, then away you go, and it set the tone straight away.
There is a kind of narrative similarity with Journey. Journey doesn't give you any instruction either. I think Journey is probably more successful at conveying what you're supposed to do to the player, based on the fact that so many people have played third-person action games that you just generally know that you move forward. You keep going.
With Journey, there was at least an environment that you were in.
It was familiar. Yeah, this is what I mean. There was a familiarity to it, which encouraged you to then explore. Whereas in this,
it was just white.
It's so stark, and it's unfortunate because that is really only the beginning of the game. I mean, halfway through, after you've done the vines, it does sort of invert, and then by the end, you're creating these kind of 3D. You're drawing blocks, and you've got these kind of 3D puzzles, and there's all this sort of lateral thinking where you're sort of stepping into paintings and then coming out somewhere else. It's very Portal-esque, actually, at that point.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you feel, Chris?
I can definitely see not knowing what to do. Because I think I'd heard you talk about it and seen sort of a couple of videos on it. I knew that the first bit was bringing ink around, but I like how it progresses. I mean, you start with the pure white when you're chucking ink about, and I really like in that bit when you put just enough on that it's like, oh, this now is now a world. Like there's a point that it's just like, oh, this is white with a couple of ink splatters around, then suddenly you put enough that all the details there, and it's somewhere you can actually look around properly. But then it sort of progresses to the shadows, and then to a proper city. I like the progression of it starts completely white and then gets some detail, and then the detail goes on, and you get the colour in the vines, and then all the colour is taken away because it's pitch dark.
It's pitch black, yeah, and you have funny purple lights and monsters that attack you.
Yeah, bloody spiders. Why is it always spiders?
Why is it always spiders? And then you get the world starts sinking around you. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that actually reminds me a lot of Limbo.
Yeah.
Especially when you go into the tower of the king. Yeah. You had electricity puzzles where you could die. Yeah. It was pitch black, so I had to actually turn the light off because I just couldn't. I could just see myself too. I couldn't see where I was going. And then with the water rising, it's like this is very, very Limbo.
And of course, there is the highlight at the end, which is Terry Gilliam, who voices the king.
I really like the beginning of that when you're him in the sort of, because it's a different style of drawing.
Yeah.
And when you go up to the mirror, and it's like a very basic animation of your 2D cardboard cutout, and you just move around.
Yeah, you look like, it's probably before your time, Chris, but you look like King Rollo. Older listeners.
I think I might know.
And then, of course, you see yourself in the painting later, and you can see you're the young boy again, drawn as kind of pencil and ink picture. And of course, the game actually ends by revealing what it is you've been doing as you've been going through, and as you said, Chris, the credits at the end are really good because you revisit all the locations you've been to, but the world is totally not as you saw it. Yeah, it's you've turned the world upside down, quite literally.
Yeah, it would have been nice for the ink sequences and that to actually have been what you did.
Yes, I thought they were, but
they're not. They might be for that first bit when you get up to the statue of him, because I completely covered that. I made that completely black.
Right.
So, the very first bit with the sort of the bamboo-y type stuff might be, but I don't know.
Yeah.
To test that out at some point.
But they did do some sneaky things, I think, in that opening area as well. There's two key points which I think could easily lose players. One is when you're trying to get across the stepping stones.
Yeah.
And the other is when you're in the room, the recursive room. So every time you walk through the door, you come back in the same room again. I mean, that was a bit mean, considering you can't actually see where anything is either.
Yeah. Also, those stepping stones, you don't actually have to jump.
No.
So, which
really?
is like...
that was a pain. I kept jumping and missing.
Yeah, I did that, and then I thought, I'll go back again to see if I got another way, and I just walked forward. It's like, because it is ingrained to jump, but you don't.
The one bit I really liked about that is if you timed your ink shot correctly or really badly, whichever way you want to do it, you can actually hit a fish, and then the fish would come up coloured black and then disappear into the water again.
The same with the frog. You can get the frog and he hops away. Also, after you've got so many balloons, you can unlock some extras. So, for example, the hose pipe's a lot of fun. when you get that, because you can just spray everything black. You can sort of stand on the spot and spin around, spraying everything black. That's quite good fun.
Yeah, I like the stop time one.
Yeah, that's cool.
Where I'll just like set it all up and then watch it just explode.
Yeah, that's it. You can fire loads of droplets and then they just drop like a big water balloon, don't they?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's sum up, I guess. So, we've already mentioned a few games we can compare it with. I mean, I think in the PlayStation stable, it's fairly compared with things like Journey and.
Yeah, because did you see the Easter egg?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's they literally put Journey in it.
Yep. It's a painting or something, isn't it?
It's you zoom in on the moon, and then it's sort of like on the top of the moon.
That's right, you can see them walking up to the mountain, can't you? Yeah. So anyway, what's the recommendations? Let's start with yourself, Andy. Would you recommend this to someone? And if so, why? If not, why not?
Oddly enough, yes, I would recommend this to the majority of people, especially after you've listened to this show and you've kind of got an idea, if you haven't played it, as to what's going on. I think that was the first part, not knowing, put me off, and it sort of set a precedence for the rest of the game, which is why I said the things that I did. But overall, hearing what you guys have said and experiencing the game fully, the narrative, the art style, the atmospherics that I experienced, I think is a very well-made game, just not the right type of game for me personally. But yes, I would recommend it to the majority of people.
Chris?
Yeah, definitely recommend it. The art's just exploring the world in the first few bits and then doing a sort of small amount of puzzles and just experiencing the story is definitely worth it. The only one thing I would have liked them to do a bit more of the giant. Playing through that again this time, I thought he's not really sort of introduced and then nothing happens with him, which
all you can see is his belly.
Yeah, but it's one of my favourite games on the PlayStation 3/4 now. So that and Journey, I would say are the two PSN games that you should play. Just for their sort of artistic merits more than maybe the gameplay. But
absolutely. I'm not going to add any more to really. I think you've summed it up, Chris. It's 2 hours long. I think everyone should give it a go. And I said if you do get stuck, the best thing to do is just spin around on the spot, spray and paint everywhere, and hope for the best. Or just keep following the golden feet. That's the tip I'll give you.